There's no robo-debt for corporations. Not 1 cent has to be paid back. The government has said if corporations are rorting the scheme, well, that's for them to decide whether they pay it back.
But businesses don't have an obligation to pay back Jobkeeper.
Oh, how good it would be to have that kind of laissez-faire approach to normal people rather than corporations. On the share market, we're in earnings season at the moment, where all the companies come out and report their half-year profits for the 6 months to December. So there's an avalanche of information coming out. You've got to hunt for it a bit about rorting of the Jobkeeper scheme, the government's subsidy for business. It has been rorted from pillar to post, but quite a few companies, to their credit, are saying, yes, we'll pay back the Jobkeeper because we didn't really need it, In fact, our revenues rose, our profit went through the roof. Because, of course, if you don't have to pay for your labour bill, if the government is paying for your staff, for your employees, that just goes straight to your bottom line. No cost of staff. The biggest cost for any business is generally staff. No cost. Corporate profits have been spectacular despite the pandemic. We just look at one, for instance, how this has been rorted. Cube. Now, Cube was set up by Chris Corrigan, one of the government's great mates, the guy who busted the wharfies in the maritime dispute a couple of decades ago on the wharves. He's now retired to Switzerland, but the guy that's taken over from him is a guy called Maurice James. Now, Cube is a $5 billion company. Its revenue was up 9% last year. Not profits, but revenue was up 9%. Despite that, it took $13.5 million, then $17 million in Jobkeeper. It paid record bonuses to Maurice and his top management. So $30 million in Jobkeeper in public money and taxpayer money. They paid back 17 to their credit, but they kept the 13.5, even though revenue went up. Almost $2 million from Jobkeeper, subsidised by the public, a bonus, an executive bonus to Maurice James from public money. Now, the test for getting Jobkeeper was that your revenue had to fall. If the company was above $1 billion in revenue, it had to fall by 50% or more. Now, this is a $5 billion company, $1 billion revenues. In order to qualify for Jobkeeper, it should have had to have a fall of 50% in revenue. So what actually happens? Revenue goes up. So how did they claim it? Now, there's all sorts of timing rorts around Jobkeeper and so on. For some companies, it depends when you get your money from the government. If that's delayed, you get your Jobkeeper. If it's not delayed, you don't. There's all sorts of rorts. It's an absolute, probably the biggest orgy of corporate rorts in Australian history. In fact, undoubtedly the biggest. We put it to the Australian Tax Office and we said, well, how did these guys qualify? Of course, they've got huge privacy restrictions on them, so they couldn't say anything, but they did not rule out, when it was put to them, that there was an exemption, a special order, a loophole awarded to some companies. They did, and we said this specifically in reference to Cube, they did not rule it out. We believe that for corporate mates of the government, special dispensations, special favours have been handed out to allow them to claim Jobkeeper. When the rules say they shouldn't be claiming Jobkeeper, we believe there's a loophole that's been given, that's been awarded to these companies, a special permission to claim this. Even when their profits are going up, even when their revenues are rising, yet there's no transparency. There's no list, unlike in the US and New Zealand. There's no list of what corporations got what. You've got to rely on corporations, on corporate honesty, on these people to be telling you whether they receive government money or not. Now, here's the real guts of the story too. An executive of Cube threatened to shut down 7 ports unless they picked up the government subsidy. And even when they picked up the government subsidy, they wanted their employees to pay them back for the hours that they did not work during the pandemic. Thanks for watching. Read the story on michaelwest.com.au. Callum Foote is a reporter. He's done a great job. We need to be onto this, as the public needs to be aware that this scheme is being rorted from pillar to post by the big end of town. Like this video if it annoys you that you've just paid for a $1.8 million executive bonus. You can support independent media by subscribing to our Patreon.